What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I want to show you guys step by step how I created this new oil paint portrait. I hope you guys will enjoy it. In fact, I know you will enjoy it. If you did enjoy it, please like this video and please subscribe for more art videos and other kinds of creative endeavors that we're going to be doing here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get started. So we're starting with a dark purple color, just a regular purple oil paint color diluted with odorless mineral spirits, just to get some overall shapes, just to kind of get the composition started. There's not going to be a whole lot of details here, but there's enough details just for me to get started, which is, you know, the way that I enjoy working at this point. I think in the future I'll start with even less detail than this, but I'm just sort of, you know, trapped, I guess, in my ways of starting with a little bit of detail. Perhaps next time we'll just start with some blobs of color and so on and so forth. So it's real important just to get kind of the not necessarily the shape, but just the placing of all the features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the eyebrows. You know, for me, that's, you know, the lips. It's just a good place to start, you know, and you can go back and make changes. You can go back and kind of revise it. But it's just good to kind of map out just a general sort of direction, you know what I mean? One of the most challenging aspects for me is just getting the right placing, the right contours for, like, you know, the side of the face. You know, I'm not an expert in anatomy by any means, but you can sort of, you know, you can sort of fake your way through it. Not that you should be faking anything, but you can just sort of, you know, you don't have to be an expert on every single bone structure and, you know, draw skulls all day long and stuff to be a, you know, to do good portraits. I think it's very, very important to study bones and skulls and anatomy and facial muscles and stuff. But oftentimes the aspect of getting stuck in anatomy is just teaching you a lot of overly complex stuff that you don't really need, in my opinion, to get started. You know, unless you want to do really, really, really advanced, realistic stuff. And I would definitely encourage everybody, you know, every few weeks or so I try to do skull studies and, you know, head lay-ins and different angles of the head, and, you know, and obviously I'm working from a photo reference. I don't even remember who that woman is, but I just thought she was really, really beautiful. She's probably somebody that I used to follow, or that I used to, you know, find on some of my hashtags or something. She's probably a makeup artist or like a body positivity advocate, something like that. For some reason I'm getting a weird iTunes notification all of a sudden. Anyway, but like I always say in my paintings, I'm going for a likeness. I'm going for as accurate as I possibly can, but at the same time, I'm not limited by that sort of mindset. I don't want to, you know, have the mindset that it has to be exactly like the photograph, you know, or it has to be exactly like the person. It's sort of a captured moment, like, if you think of it in terms of photography. So now we're just, let me interrupt myself for a second. I'm just sort of blocking in the composition with some, this is actually not black, it's actually Payne's gray, which I actually switched over to Payne's gray instead of using black. Actually, I think on the right hand side of that actually is black. You can tell by how dark it is. I think it's lamp black. But for the majority of the way that the rest of the painting, the rest of the composition progresses, I switch over to Payne's gray, which is a wonderful, really, really light, almost bluish black gray. Actually, I don't know why they call it gray, because it's not, there's nothing gray about it, but I guess it's like a gray down, lighter version of black, and it's much less powerful, which is sometimes much more effective than just going in with really dark color. So anyway, we're building an underpainting at this stage. Just working with dark and I think this is like a mixture of just lamp black and titanium white with a little bit of ultramarine blue. For some reason I'm tripping over all these color words. Maybe because I've, you know, am just overwhelmed with all the colors that I've been using lately. There was like a little piece of opaque paint that was stuck on the canvas for some reason from a previous, you know, one of the process of the studio. I just splattered paint somehow. So that's what that was. Really had to, you know, rub that out. So this is just an underpainting. I think in the Renaissance the old masters used to call it just like a grisaille underpainting, or like a sort of a dead color layer. And this is just sort of my version of it. I'm not saying this is the correct way to do it, but we're kind of just establishing values, just sort of establishing shadows, values, light placement before we even get into color. Because I think if you know, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing, kind of like me in this video, if you just start with black and white and grays and sort of dark blues and dark purples before you really get into those light colors, you know, the skin, this will really help you. Just sort of think about where you're going to place the contours, where you're going to place the paint. This is one of the most laborious, tedious, not that it was boring, the process was extremely invigorating and exciting, but just the time that it took to really do this portrait was really laborious. And I really wanted to challenge myself to do something different than we did in the last couple of videos where I was doing the alla prima thing. This is more like what we did on the solitaire Jane Seymour portrait, but this one is taken into a much more laborious layering level. And I think the result really speaks for itself. It's a really strong painting. So even in this stage, you know, 6 minutes into the video, I've sped up some of the video obviously just to kind of get it going. But this is all just a grisaille sort of underpainting. I don't know if it's actually grisaille, but obviously you see how I sketched in some of the ideas of where the eye placement's going to go. There's slowly but surely a little more detail. I haven't even, you know, I'm just blocking in the shadows of where the hair is going to be and where her you know, camisole is going to be, her shirt. You know, we've just establishing light and dark values, different shades, and it's basically just kind of like a black and white photograph, so to speak. And I wanted to just block it in with dark color just so I wouldn't be distracted too much with, you know, I wanted to layer lighter colors and lighter contrasts over a darker background. And that's why I decided to just start with these really dark, muddy colors. But I think the result was extremely amazing. I sounded Australian there for a second. Sounds really amazing. It was really amazing just to see the process of how I went from sort of dark to light in this photograph. And you don't have to work dark to light. You can work light to dark. You know, there's different styles. You know, there's different styles of underpaintings. You can do like a more muted sort of burnt umber, burnt sienna-ish color layer underpainting if you wish. If you don't like sort of the dark cold colors, you can add more colors. But I think it's important to at least experiment with underpainting. This is one of the first paintings where I really went 150% into just structuring the painting, structuring the values, structuring the lines. And it just looks so weird at this stage. And that's the thing about oil painting, or even acrylic painting, or even drawing, or watercolor painting, or ceramics, or sculpture, or songwriting, or writing poetry, or novels, or learning to play an instrument. Things are going to look weird. Things are going to sound weird. Things are just going to be really weird for a really long time. Before you get into details, I'm really trying to detach from details right away, because you don't need them. The only thing details are really going to do is kind of rush the painting. The only thing details are really going to do is sort of compensate for no structure. The only thing details are really going to do is sort of, it's kind of like polishing a turd when you try to add too much details to something that you don't have any foundation in. And probably by many other expert artist standards, I'm probably adding too much detail in here already. But by a lot of other people's standards, this is not really hardly any detail. By my own standards, I really had to restrain myself from just, you know, getting bogged down into detail. You know, that's something you don't want to do, because it's just it's better just to start with blobs of color, blobs of shapes, blobs of values, blobs. You just start with like a big blob, like, you know, I don't know, like you're just finger painting or something. And speaking of finger painting, there's actually some later scenes in this painting that you guys will witness where I'm just kind of blending with my fingers, doing some glazing, just all with my fingers, and it's really exciting. And I'm not even sketching the outline of the eyeball because I just want to make sure that I sort of get the right shape, the right structure for the shape of the eye, sort of the almondy, so to speak, shape that we talked about. But the almondy shape will always be softened. It'll always kind of be refined and sort of, you know, made less almondy, so to speak. So now, as you can see, we're layering in. I colored in the eyes a little bit, but the majority of this next couple scenes are going to be layering in lighter colors of the hair. This woman had a really beautiful, gorgeous, like auburn, sort of like burnt sienna, almost like a burnt umber sort of color. And I think this is a mixture of burnt umber, burnt sienna, and a really, really beautiful dark red called crimson. This is one of my favorite reds. It's definitely a color that you need in your palette. Again, it's called crimson. It's just this gorgeous, dark, auburny, sort of just amazing dark red. Almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, almost like a dark plum, like when you go to the grocery store and you see one of those really, really dark reddish, purplish plums. And you can actually use this color, you know, you can add titanium white to it, or, you know, you can add cerulean blue to it, or you can add, you know, yellow ochre and just make it even lighter. Now we're jumping into the really, really exciting stages of glazing over the underpainting. Now my paint was a little, how do I say, what's the word I was looking for? It didn't start off on the exact right tone, but I wanted to sort of get in just, you know, that covering up that contour. But I'm establishing in a strong way, even with this color layer, the different levels of the flesh tone. I don't want all the same colors for the flesh tone, you know what I mean? Because flesh is not a solid color tone. It's many, many different colors. So this is a mixture of different reds, mostly titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, maybe a little bit of burnt umber, also some raw umber, and some permanent red I used to mix these skin tones. I might have mixed a little bit of different, maybe like ultramarine blue or cerulean blue, just to kind of keep the colors toned down. But I'm not attempting to cover up the underpainting. As you can see, it's kind of bleeding through, and that's what I was going for. I wanted to, you know, because I'm trying to, like, sort of like an old master, like a wannabe old master's technique here, just sort of my version of the old master's technique, where they would build up an underpainting and then sort of glaze over the top. It's a little too thick for an actual traditional glaze, but it looked really, really thin at the time, and as you can see, it's still fairly thin. It's not very, very extremely opaque, thick, you know, ground covering paint. I diluted this with walnut oil, because walnut oil is so amazing, but it actually dries really, really slowly, and I let the underpainting dry for 4 or 5, 6 days, and then I came back and started layering in the flesh tones, and then after that was done, I let that sit for almost another week, maybe 5 or 6 days, and then the painting sort of kind of went like that. So I didn't do this painting, you know, the footage makes it look like I did it all in one day. No, that's not how I did it. I did this painting probably over the course of the last month. You guys maybe saw on my Instagram some of the our initial sketches for this, but you can really see the amazing benefit from doing that cold dead color layer underpainting. The painting is just really starting to sing. It's really starting to glow at me, you know, and that's what I was aiming for from the get-go. I'm layering in, what was this color? I think this might have been just another permanent red, sort of diluted glaze mixed with a little bit of crimson. And I'm going pretty strong on that red because I want that. I'm going to end up layering even more glazes on the top of this. So it's okay to have like sort of thick, opaque paint, even if you're doing sort of a glaze. But try to keep in mind that you want your painting to sort of reflect from the bottom layer all the way to your last layer. And some of them will get covered up. Some of them will be sort of, you know, deleted by the end process. But as you can see, the dark tone of the underpainting, sort of the dead cold color layer, is really setting the stage for this sort of glowing effect that I was going for. I'm not saying that I'm doing it the exact precise way, but I was just sort of experimenting based off of my research and knowledge of the last couple of years of how the old masters did things. And that's, sort of what I'm attempting to achieve on here. Now it's time to fix up those lips to really, really get that warm, rich color layer. And I actually started really, really dark on the lips, and we're actually going to go even lighter on the lips because I've noticed that my, paintings in general, if they're too dark, if they have too many dark colors and too many dark contrasts with, it's better to have your colors be perfectly light and then perfectly dark. You don't want to have like lips, for example, if they're too dark, they can just look kind of cartoonish and just sort of boxed in, sort of drawn in. It's better to sort of lighten the colors with highlights and so on and so forth. So look at this, is an amazing glaze that I actually made with vermilion. And Velasquez used to do that quite a bit. On that forehead there, you can see how that vermilion glaze is just glazing so wonderfully under that underpainting and some of those other flesh tones that we use. Now it's time to really nail in the contours of this ear. I think ears are one of my strongest weak spots, if that's such a thing. That's my strongest weak spot, or my biggest weak spot, you know what I mean? I'm just not very confident when it comes to ears, but it doesn't really, you don't have to be a master at painting ears, as long as you sort of get the general shape, the general contours, you can always go in with more layers and more glazes and more opaque paints to sort of make the ear more structured. And the painting just looks so weird still, but as the layers go on, one layer over another, one glaze over another, more opaque paint here and there, the painting really just starts to come together. But it really, really takes a lot of time. It's not something that you can rush. There's the style that we were doing a couple weeks ago, the alla prima, all in one go. And I definitely have not mastered that. And I'm not saying that I've mastered, this layer technique either. A lot of this is just pure experimentation and just trying things. I think I'm not saying that's the best way to learn, but it's one of the most rewarding ways to learn, is because you can make your own mistakes and sort of just learn how you go. So I'm holding my colored, my reference photo here right up against the paper. And I really wanted to make an emphasis to really focus in on the eyes. We've got some highlights on the eyes. We've got some darker colors on the eyes. And we eventually go into some layers here, some glazes to sort of make the eye, the white part of the eye, more in unison with the rest of the painting. Just really making sure I have the, I think maybe in this stage we start working on the eyelashes. I think I'm still sort of experimenting with the eyebrows. But once you sort of get the eyebrows in place, the eyelashes, I'm definitely going in to thicken up these layers between the, the eyes, not between the eyes, but over the eyes. And I think there was one thing that I actually forgot to do, was to color in the little place above the eyelid. There I'm doing some finger blending just to really get some smoothness into this process. As you can see, the contours and the shapes are not nearly blended enough as they need to be, but that will be further achieved as you guys explore this video. Again, thank you so much for watching this art video. I can't thank you guys enough. And I hope to inspire all my viewers and all my subscribers. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the art channel. I want to show you guys that a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of dedication, a little bit of practice, you can do a lot of really, really amazing things with painting. So again, there's I think I perhaps went a little too thick. I used a little bit too thick of a brush for the eyelashes. I think next time I'm going to use my really, 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 really thin brush to sort of really get the thinness of the eyelashes, because the more thick you go on eyelashes, the less realistic it's going to go, in terms of perception. But at the same time, if you go too thin, no one's going to be able to see the eyelashes. So it's good to be able to have some contrast of thin eyelashes going. I mean, she looks like she's kind of just got some really, really thick mascara on, which is really cool. Again, I'm just sort of extending the eyelashes, making sure they're all in the right place. You know, sometimes you got to stand up and like I'm doing here and just change your angle. You can really see how those eyes are starting to pop. She looks like she's kind of starting to have a conversation with the viewer. And I was just really, I might go back to this painting in another year or two and think, oh, I could have done so much better. But as far as my skill level is concerned, as far as my process, I think I definitely achieved what I was aiming at in this style of painting. She looks like, she's having a conversation with us, and I think that's really cool. She looks like she's listening to us. She's looking right at us. And I just really enjoyed the process. We're going in with an even lighter color on those lips to really, you can see how the dark pink wasn't quite working as well as this lighter color of pink. This is a mixture of a couple different reds and titanium white. I think I was probably using permanent red and a blend of crimson. And I also added a little bit of ultramarine to keep the reddish kind of a cool gray, just so it didn't get to be too pinkish. It's good to be pinkish and reddish and sort of flushy, but at the same time, the more flushy and pink sort of your paintings are, they can look kind of sterile and just sort of phony looking. So if you ever want to cool your colors down a little bit, make them look a little more realistic, I would suggest adding a little bit of cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, maybe even a little bit of Payne's gray just to tone the redness down. You could add burnt, or you could add raw umber or burnt umber. There's just so many amazing oil paint colors. Also other mediums, watercolors and acrylics. You can get a lot of these colors also. But you can see how everything is real mapped out, which at this stage is good because you have to sort of have a direction where you're going. But that's why we didn't start with a real strong map. We started more with blotches of color. Now it's time to just really fix those teeth. Now the teeth, I'm coming in with a really strong opaque thick layer of titanium white, but we're actually going to tone that down a little bit because obviously, as you can see, it's way too strong. It looks like she's got like, what are those old mints they used to call them? Not Tic Tacs, but it looks like she's got a bunch of Tic Tacs coming out of her mouth right now, which is not the effect I was going for, So it's hard to paint teeth. It's sort of hard to paint somebody with their mouth open with teeth. It's hard to paint somebody smiling for sure. One of my goals as an artist is to do like a really beautiful painting of somebody smiling. But it's really not easy, but it's not, at the same time, it's not as hard as we make it. It's just a sort of a matter of just getting the right tones, the right shapes to sort of make the teeth sort of work within the painting. But you can see how if I had left the lips really dark, the teeth definitely would not have worked as well. And now the teeth are too light, so that's why we're going to go back and sort of darken the teeth in. I think that's super important just to pay attention to your tones. And I was experimenting with zinc white because zinc white I was actually probably using both titanium and zinc white in this painting interchangeably. But for some reason, man, titanium white is just always the best white. Although it's really opaque, so a lot of times you really have to dilute it and mix it with other colors. But the reason why I experimented with the zinc white is because it's more transparent. It's more easy to mix with your colors, but I've actually heard that it doesn't stand up as well in paintings as well. It's sort of, the color goes off and goes stale and so on and so forth. So for the most part, man, I think if the only white you're really ever going to need is titanium white. I mean, I would encourage you to don't use titanium white just straight out of the tube. Mix it with other colors. Just, buy some other tubes of different white. They have flake white. I remember this one flake white that I got that had lead paint in it. It was one of the most amazing oil paints that I ever had, but I couldn't find it anymore. And but this is a kind of an oily titanium white. There was a little bit too much oil in the mix, but overall it was a really good. So now we're just going for broke for more details. Not necessarily details. I should say more contrast. I'm trying to get more contrasts. I'm trying to get more shades. I'm trying to make all the as you can see in this part of the oil painting, I'm just moving my finger around to sort of get a soft smoky sort of effect. Leonardo da Vinci used to call it sfumato. That's how he worked on the Mona Lisa. Now we're just sort of really perfecting the eyebrows. And you can really see how far the painting has come, but we're not even anywhere near the end yet. So I hope you guys are enjoying this filming process so far. I'm super happy with where the portrait is actually going, but there's a few things that we really need to change. For example, we need some more highlights on the hair. I need to adjust the little dimple underneath her nose there. You know, that little, I don't know what it's called, that little dimple that everybody has in their upper lip. I just want to add a couple of highlights, do a little bit more layering, but I think overall the portrait's definitely going in the right direction. You know, I've got the right mood and the right colors and the right sort of flesh tones that I'm looking for, which is really awesome. But you know, it's important to get away from it sometimes too. You know, this painting's been you know, been sort of produced over the course of several weeks now, you know, days, several weeks. So it's important not to rush your paintings. You know, it's always good to really take your time. You know, depending on if you're trying to achieve, you know, a more polished, more realistic approach. So, you know, stick around for the rest of the video, and thank you so much for watching this video. So in this stage, we are just going further, adding some really rich highlights, some reddish highlights to sort of reflect off of the dark background. We're actually going to lighten up the left side of this background. And you'll see in this stage the painting really starts to come together. It was almost just like I was running for home plate here, and just you know, I wasn't rushing or anything, but I was just really enjoying the process. Just taking, you know, a day or two just to do each little section if I needed to, and just really making sure the painting was going in the right direction. At the same time, it wasn't all advanced layering. You know, I did a lot of wet on wet. You know, a lot of stages of this painting is alla prima, all in one go, sort of wet on wet blending. But that in conjunction with the layering, you know, letting your painting sit and dry for weeks at a time sometimes is really the best way to do it. You know, just get away from it. And also not even in terms of layering, but in terms of just coming back at it with a fresh mindset. That's so important. You know, this painting would not have turned out quite so good if I had just tried to rush it. One of my good friends on the internet, she's a huge fan of my work, but I send her some of my alla prima portraits, and she's like, they're good, but your technique, you know, well, this technique is not serving you well because, you know, it looks, you know, your tones aren't right. You know, it looks, you're making the people look different than they are, and so on and so forth. So I really took that to mind, and I was like, well, for this next painting, what can we do better? I was actually already working on this painting when she actually told me that. But I definitely, you know, that's why it's so important to get critiques from people. You know, don't get stuck in a box. You know, if any of you guys have critiques on this portrait here, feel free to leave them in the comment section. You know, so I really love the soft texture that I got on her face. You know, her bone structure. She just looks so feminine. I don't know that I've actually done as great of a job as I've done on this one in terms of making somebody look so soft and feminine. That's definitely what I was going for in this. You can just see how that dark underpainting is still sort of shining through the portrait, even though it's kind of covered up by other layers. And we're not quite done here. I wanted to add more details and more just interesting, you know, make the hair look more like hair. You know, I'm adding some light highlights. And you'll see here in a moment when the background, I lighten the background to this amazing bluish color. It just sort of makes the whole painting pop. At least I think it does. Right here. Isn't that just so amazing how that just, I mean, it just solidifies the whole painting, but all at the same time, we're not quite done. I want to fix that nose. You know, we're going to, this is an interesting process. I thought the eyes were too bland, so I'm adding a little bit of burnt sienna mixed with raw umber just to sort of make the eyes have more tonal quality to them. They were a little too dark sitting there. So I wanted, the model in the photograph had these amazing brownish eyes. So this is pretty much the end of the process. Thank you so much for joining us here on the channel, guys. I hope I inspired some people on this. Please visit me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist, and Please feel free to send me an email at andrewmarlow22@gmail.com if you have any questions. And I also have a Facebook art gallery, Andrew Marlow Artist, Marlow Cremitas Art on Facebook. And I'm also going to be building a website. Here's the end result of the painting. The light was reflecting a little bit strangely on it, but thank you so much for joining us for this artistic process.
If the kingdom is overthrown, meet me at the cornerstone. I know that I can't be without you. This bond is solid.